Well, there we are, the traditional sounds of Scotland with a cheeky little tune sneaked in there. Wasn't that wonderful? Hello and greetings from Scotland, where this morning it has been snowing because winter has truly hit here. But wherever you are in the world, welcome to this very special Clan Gregor gathering. I'm Lady MacGregor, I'm Fiona MacGregor, and I'm married to the Chief, Sir Malcolm MacGregor of MacGregor. My day job is as a broadcaster, so I was given this lovely task of hosting this very special get-together today, because this year, 2022, is a very special year for us. And why is it special? Well, it's exactly 200 years since the Clan Gregor Society was set up, the third clan society in the world ever to be created. We are one of the world's oldest and best known clan societies in the world. How good is that? It's also a big anniversary because it is 200 years since the MacGregors played such a big part, a central role in welcoming the British King George IV to Edinburgh in Scotland. Now that was a real tartan fest, and more of that shortly. Now, because it's such a key anniversary for we MacGregors, we'd love to have seen everybody here in Scotland this year, but unfortunately a certain virus has put paid to that. But the MacGregors are fighters and we don't give up. And it's great that we can connect today online. Today, we've got MacGregors joining us from here in the UK and right across the world. We've got chapters of the Clan Gregor Society from America and Canada. We've members of the Clan Gregor Society from Australia and New Zealand, and from Germany and Southeast Asia. We've also got our sister society, the American Clan Gregor Society, here today, and very welcome you are too. It's wonderful to see everybody online here. Now, this get-together is going to last approximately an hour. If you've got a question, you can always put it in the chat box and we'll try and get back to you at some stage with an answer or a comment. Can I ask you please to keep yourselves on mute? The mute button is generally at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to be introducing each speaker as we go along, and nearly all of them are members of our council, the small group that keeps the whole society running. Finally, best bit of all, at the end, you may want to have a wee dram ready. Or if it's early morning, and I think it possibly is in some parts of the world, possibly something suitably non-alcoholic, but more of that later. Now, the Clan Gregor Society has members all over the world, but wherever we are a family, a clan with the motto, "Royal is my race," because Clan Gregor hails from regal stock. The MacGregor chiefs descend from ancient Scottish kings. And on the subject of ours, chiefs, I'd like to introduce our chief. Please welcome my husband, Sir Malcolm MacGregor of MacGregor, the 24th chief of Clan Gregor.
Well, thank you very much for that very fulsome introduction. And it's a great thing that we are using modern technology to gather together in 2022 to commemorate 200 years of the Clan Gregor Society. If I could just have the first slide, please, Richard. Is that it?
I've got to share. Just give me a moment, if that's all right. Okay.
This painting by Turner of the Highland clans in Edinburgh in 1822 is really symbolic of the foundation of Clan Gregor in 1820, or the Clan Gregor Society in 1822. It particularly illustrates in Turner's mind, and therefore I presume to the viewer, that there really was a Highland revival after the bad days of the Jacobite uprisings, which had ended so disastrously in 1745 or 1746. And there was not much reference to Highlanders or indeed anyone else in Scotland until the arrival of the king in 1822 on his well-known and famous visit to Scotland. which was orchestrated by Sir Walter Scott. If I could have the next slide, please, Richard. Now, a very good friend of Sir Walter's was Sir John MacGregor, who had recently, well, he'd been chief for about 20 years, and they got on extremely well. They had a lot of mutual interest in Highland, particularly Highland history, although Sir Walter never really went further north than the Trossachs. Nonetheless, they were certainly as one when it came to the Highland revival, putting the Highlanders back on the map, putting the days of the 45 uprising and the other Jacobite uprisings behind them. And I believe that Sir John had the idea of forming a society with other MacGregors, and no doubt he would have been encouraged to do it by Sir Walter Scott. As we've heard, there were very few clan societies at that time, which I'll come back to in a minute. But Sir John, in my view, was probably the driving force for the formation of the society with other learned and worthy MacGregors in and around Edinburgh and Glasgow. But very sadly, he died about a month before the great visit by the king. And so it really came on to, or behoved Sir Evan MacGregor, his son and heir, to really get it all together. If I could have the next slide, please. Sir Evan, by the time of the 1822 visit, had only been chief for about a month. He was a very colourful character, and clearly it was his desire to honour his father's legacy, to get the society up and running. And it was initially designed, the society, to help MacGregors male MacGregor boys who did not have the wherewithal to get an education, and the society was going to help out on that front. And it's interesting that education is still one of our primary objectives today, 200 years later. Sir Evan was a great showman, as you can see from this painting by George Watson. But at the time, as we've heard, there were only two other societies. One was the Buchanans, which interestingly was formed in 1725, and the Grahams in 1759. And then we came along in 1822 on the back of the 1822 extravaganza in Edinburgh under Sir Walter Scott, or under the auspices of Sir Walter Scott. And if I could have the next slide, please. Sir Evan's daughter, I think she was his 9th child, Amelia, is well known to all. And here she is in full finery. Note the sash on the left shoulder. And the society, this picture was done, I would imagine, somewhere around 1890. But the society, for various reasons, I think, went through quite a lengthy quiet period until about the 1880s, 1890s, when they had their great gathering in Glengyle, and that was orchestrated by Amelia, and she was a driving force of the society, and she wrote the first history of Clan Gregor in 2 volumes. There were supposed to be 3, but the 3rd one never materialized. Within her sort of sphere of influence and orbit, in 1909, the American Clan Gregor Society was formed, and that was part and parcel of this whole idea of forming clan societies. So they would have taken their lead from Scotland, particularly from my grandfather, Callum. Amelia was there, and Callum's sister, who married Dr. Magruder in Washington, D.C. If I could have the next slide, please. And here they all are in, I think it's 1885, at Glengyle House, one of the sort of great get-togethers of the day. And I think the young chief Callum is in the center, who'd have been aged about 16 in the Royal Navy at the time, and all the sort of directors and what we would now call council members seated with other clan members gathered together. And Glengyle, of course, was a very significant place to be, the home of Rob Roy. And if I just come on to the final slide, and I think what has been made reference to is the fact that these societies, whether it's Clan Gregor Society or American Clan Gregor Society, mushroomed into the overseas, what I call the overseas team, Australia, Philippines, you name it, we have members all over the world. And this photograph, although they're not McGregor's, illustrates it very well. They're actually the Forbes children of the publishing Forbes, Malcolm Forbes, taken in the early 1960s in New York. And there they all are in their Forbes tartan. And I think it's a very poignant photograph, and it illustrates the fact that societies are not just based in Scotland, but have become a worldwide phenomenon. And we saw that certainly, well, whatever it was, 12 years ago now, in 2009, with the great gathering in Edinburgh, where people came from all over the world to that. And that concludes my introduction.
Malcolm, thank you very much for that. Very much. It was a really interesting look back at how the Clan Gregor Society came to be, and love that picture at the end of the Forbes children all in their kilts. They're looking very, very pleased with themselves and very Scottish, and I think with New York possibly in the background. Well, as we know, tartan has become incredibly fashionable since that famous 1822 King's visit to Edinburgh. And now I'd like to welcome Peter Lorry, Vice Chairman of the Clan Gregor Society Council. Peter's an historian, and he's going to tell us how this multicoloured cloth became all the rage, should I say. Now, Peter's video is a little bit low, so you might want to, if you can turn your sound up, you might want to do that. But doesn't he look incredible? Peter, take it away.
What I'm wearing is, in fact, a reproduction. I've got a couple of fragments here. Now, this is actually based on one of the plaids that Charles Edward Stuart wore in 1745. It was left with Lady Mackintosh at Moy Hall, south of Inverness. And after the Rising, a number of covert Jacobites, if you like, came to Lady Mackintosh as she got older, and she cut the plaid up into different fragments, and there's two of them. Now, the Scottish Tartan Museum has managed to reconstruct the entire thing, and this was a reproduction that was made for me. Now, one of the problems with this, they're difficult to put on, they're awkward, is there's a 42-inch repeat on the set. So if you think about a modern kilt, that's not really much use. And I've got here, this is a Cameron Highlanders kilt from the First World War. And typically of a modern kilt, there is the two yellow lines represent the repeat on the set. And of course, the way the military do it, you have those yellow lines at the back of the kilt. Civilian kilts, non-military ones, tend to actually repeat the set through the pleating, but the military economise a little bit by doing it that way. This one's 100 years old, of course. So the military didn't really like the fact that the kind of plaid that was being woven in the Highlands had this enormously long set. So they effectively produced the Black Watch tartan with a much smaller set, something about that size, in order that it could be pleated. The better off would be wearing plaids like this. So then they were stitched together to make the kind of modern kilt, but there weren't that many different tartans. We didn't clan tartans as such, they were mainly district tartans made by the local weavers. Now, we move forward after the 45, hereditary jurisdictions had gone, we get to the latter part of the 18th century, and lots of gentlemen have decided, Highland gentlemen have decided to make their homes in London or in Edinburgh, and they'd been busy clearing their clansfolk either off into the army or in various places like Canada and Australia, whatever, America. And but of course they were hankering after the old days, setting up Highland societies, and of course then saying, oh, this is my tartan, that's your tartan, and so on, and developing little tartans. Now, Walter Scott in 1822, great romantic, but a devout unionist. He started writing novels, as you probably know, about different aspects of the romantic past. And of course, he hit on this idea that the king hadn't been in Scotland since Charles II had been crowned after the execution of his father in England in 1649. And so there hadn't been a visit of a reigning monarch ever since. The man who became James the second and seventh in 1685, did actually visit Scotland, but not after he'd been crowned. So Walter Scott wanted to bring the King, George IV at that time, up to Scotland, and raised a great deal of interest among some of the Highland chiefs who'd been involved in the Highland societies and so on. And all of a sudden, everybody had to develop their own tartans. So there were some earlier ones, but an awful lot of what we now know as clan tartans really date from that time, 1822. And many of them weren't woven in the Highlands, they were woven in places like Tillicoultry, which is in the hill foots south of the Ochil Hills.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. You certainly looked the part there. And of course, after the 1822 visit, you had the aristocracy adopting more and more tartans. And of course, you had Queen Victoria, who came to Scotland, fell in love with Scotland. She and her husband built the new Balmoral Castle, and everything within Balmoral was tartan carpets, tartan curtains, tartan chairs, even tartan linoleum on the floor, lino on the floor. So there we are. Queen Victoria was one of those who also promoted tartan, but thanks, Peter. But of course, where you have a tartan, you will need some bagpipes, because 200 years ago, when the Clan Gregor Society was formed, they were also rather fashionable. 200 years ago, tunes like MacGregor's Lament, MacGregor's Gathering, Hey Johnny Cope, Killiecrankie, and the Rout of Glenfruin were all the rage. And today we're very lucky because we have our own piper and a member of council, Richard J. McGregor, all the way from Australia, who's going to give us a tune. And Richard, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And that tune, of course, was The Young MacGregor. It was written for the son of the chief and composed for the current chief's father back in 1939. So I think just before war broke out. they had time to actually do some composing. And what a lovely tune it is, the young MacGregor. Now, Clan Gregor has a long history of famous pipers. Got Richard in Australia and his father. They are both pipers, and they are part of that tradition. So it's time to introduce our own Richard MacGregor. He's been society chairman for going on for 28 years. And now he and Richard in Australia are going to tell us about the history of MacGregor piping and the technique of actually playing the bagpipes. Guys, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So Richard, tell us a little bit about this. Lots of us just have not a clue about how the bagpipe works, and what exactly you're doing with your arms and with your mouth and with. Just tell us a little bit about what you have to do to actually make the thing work.
Okay. Well, often I kind of wonder what I'm trying to do at the same time. Essentially, the bagpipe is what it says it is. Okay, it's a bagpipe. So essentially, you have just got my pair here. So you got the bag. Okay, so the bag is where you keep the air, and everybody seems to come up and they always say, "Hey, man, you must have some amazing lungs," and it's not like that at all. To be quite honest, it's sorry to disappoint you, but essentially it's like riding a bike. Okay, the riding bike the first few times is pretty hard, but you kind of get a rhythm, and it's the same thing with the bagpipes. Okay, so essentially you blow into the bag using something called blowpipe. This little part here, and once the bag is full, you crank it up, and essentially it's a rhythm between you blowing and you squeezing. Okay, so you blow, you kind of feel that pressure. Once it kind of gets to the top, take a breath, because you can't perpetually breathe ad infinitum. So you start squeezing the bag, and the idea is you just keep that momentum, that kind of pressure in the bag at a constant level. And you can always tell a really good piper because that little hum in the background is just constant, just kind of like you know, somebody who's just learning the bagpipes, because it sounds more like which is not so pleasant. Essentially, you've got the bag, and it's attached to these big long things that look like spider legs. They're called the drones. Okay, and you've got big long ones called the bass drone, and you've got two tenor drones which have the same reed inside it. And the idea behind having drones is that it provides you with the bass. Okay, so that's what gives you that hum, kind of that the big round sound. You don't play the drones; they just kind of hum in the background. What you do play is the chanter, which is the little thing that looks like a recorder for most people. It's got 9 notes on it, and that's essentially where the music could come from. Essentially, in the chanter, you have a tiny little reed that vibrates very, very quickly. And that's what gives it the music, so that you can actually play that. So yeah, it just becomes a bit of a, as I said, it becomes a bit of a rhythm. So you don't after a while, you don't even think about blow, squeeze, it just happens. What you tend to think about is more the music, trying to put music into music, which under pressure, when you're playing pipes, can be quite challenging. So, you know, not only are you blowing and squeezing and thinking about where you are in music, what next tune's coming up, but potentially if you're playing with a band, you're also marching and trying to keep your dressing and so forth. So there's a lot going on. It becomes, yeah.
How do you memorize all that music, particularly when you're playing solo?
Good question. Lots and lots and lots of repetition. Yeah, so I tend to start learning tune on the practice charter. That's my practice charter there. So you just sit there and go over the music and go over the music and go over the music and go over the music. And eventually it becomes a little bit more ingrained into your muscle memory for your fingers. And then I transition, if it's a hard tune, I transition to kind of like a set of half pipes, which is basically the bag and this. And then eventually I'll transition to the full set. And then again, it's just practice and practice and practice until you can kind of do it without even thinking about it.
There is a big and long tradition of MacGregors and pipers, and this is the tradition is that John MacGregor, who played his pipes at Bonnie Prince Charlie's raising of the standard in Glenfinnan, And those pipes are said to be the ones which are currently at Blair Castle. They don't look much like MacGregor pipes, and the tartan bow is certainly not MacGregor, but they are said to be the ones that he actually played. Whether they are or not is another question. But the MacGregors had a very well-established tradition of piping, particularly in Clan An Scailage. This is just an article. I know you won't want to read it, but if you look up Clan An Scailage, you'll see that there's many things written about them. They were famous. They won many competitions, and they were based. If you could see it, the right-hand side is General Roy's map of the 1750s. You can get a rough idea because down the bottom of the left-hand picture is Kenmore and Loch Tay. So Drumchari is in that area there. You can see in Roy's map that the whole area is known as Drumchari. And this is where they were based. And when they were in competition, they were described as of Fortingal, which was the main parish. As you can just see Fortingal off the very left-hand side of the screen. And there was many of them. Nobody really knows exactly where the forebears come from. The Duncanmore, Alpin and Ewan, and they were well-known pipers. It was assumed, or has been assumed, that they were part of that tradition. But certainly by the time we get to Patrick, there's a whole series of MacGregors, all pipers, all winning competitions and all very well known. You can see here, if you look very carefully, this is the 1785 competition. You'll see at the top that John MacGregor, who won first prize at Edinburgh, is going to play The Head of the Little Bridge or Cameron's Gathering. And then there's one later on, a piece by Peter MacGregor. This is, again, a booklet which is now out of print. It's really interesting because they reckon, if you look on the left-hand side, that Duncanmore, the first in that one, actually was at the Battle of Glenfruin. I don't know, we have no idea what the tradition is for this, but that's what's said. And that it's said also that he wrote the Rout of Glenfruin. Alpin has a claim to fame as he is supposed to be the one who played at Rob Roy's deathbed in 1734, when Rob Roy called for his piper, and he was the one supposedly who came to play. And so you can see from this that there are these are the competitions. You can see the MacGregors were quite to the fore, firsts and seconds and thirds, often first. And so there are many tunes which they play. These are some of them, not all of them, listed on the left-hand side. And they all have some connection with MacGregors. So that's, I think, just a touch of history. So I think we can go back to Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard and Richard, thank you very much. A fascinating subject. It really is. And how lovely to think that the MacGregors have produced such fine pipers and continue to do so today. So thank you very much indeed. And while we're on to this spine-tingling Scottish music, let's hear again from Richard J. MacGregor of Australia and New Zealand with his rendition of Donella MacGregor. Richard, thank you very much indeed. That's a lovely tune, absolutely lovely. And I can tell you that we had hoped to get Richard playing live for us, but as was pointed out, because they're down under Australia, New Zealand, I think it's sort of the wee small hours of the morning, and Richard's neighbours probably wouldn't take too kindly to Richard playing the bagpipes at 1 a.m, but absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Now, 150 years after it was formed, which is back in the sort of 70s, 80s of the last century, it seemed like the Clan Gregor Society was taking over the world. Yes, by the late 20th century, we had the American chapters of the Clan Gregor Society created in the 1980s. And we now have branches in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, you name it. I'd now like to introduce Keith McGregor from America. He's a council member and North American representative of the Clan Gregor Society.
The right button.
Isn't it? Keith, I'm just saying, what time is it with you, please?
Too early.
Too early, is it?
Yeah,
Have you had your
we're clinging
breakfast?
to our coffee cups right now, but
All
that's
right,
okay.
You've had breakfast though. Now listen, you take it away, Keith. Council member and North American representative of the Clan Gregor Society. Tell us what you've got to tell us.
Right. Well, I thought I'd talk just a bit about what it is we do. We have quite a few members, of course, on this side of the Atlantic, and they're always asking those sorts of questions. And I thought I'd start with what I consider to be one of the pillars of the society, which is, and thanks to Peter, by the way, for many years of putting this all together, these are the chapter newsletters, or the Clan Gregor newsletters, and they go out to all our members. Very colorful. They've been going for about, 35 years, Peter, something like that. And they've gotten better and better. And what I really like about it is there's a compendium of knowledge in these newsletters that when you stack it all up is pretty much unequaled, I think, in any other clan. It really delves into every aspect of who we are, where we've been, who the people are, the records, pictures, of course, of everyone. We put in as many pictures as we can. And I think going forward, this is going to be the basis for our library. And I'd like to see that. We're in the process right now of moving everything you see in 40 newsletters or 50 newsletters onto the website. It's a formidable piece of work. So with that, Richard, could we go next?
Yeah.
And here, of course, is the front page of the website designed by Richard in Oz. Thank you very much. This is one of our marches, of course, at the Locker and Head Games. The two pillars then meet, and I think we get something like a real history going here, a better history maybe than you'll find from many other clans. Could we go on? Right, now that history, you say, well, what am I looking at? You're looking at the Averlemnos stone. It's Pictish carvings describing, we think, family groups, all very mystical. You see these on tattoos on people's arms quite a bit lately. We are indeed said to be Picts, Picts being the Bronze Age people who overrun Scotland some 5,000 years ago. And the DNA has come around to show us that quite a few of us were indeed these people. That's the start. Richard? This picture was, I think Malcolm had this picture, but now go back one. I might as well. So we go all the way from that stone to, of course, 1822. Things have changed a bit, but as you can see, we cover quite the span of time. We've just jumped about 4,000 years. Richard? I wanted to put this in. It's helped me very much because it happens to be my family. And it shows a certain descent from Gregor Allen, one of our chiefs in the early days of records. The reason I'm putting it here is to show you the type of information we have and we publish and make available to our members that you just don't find elsewhere. We're looking here at roughly a period of 800 years. And if you're digging for your family, which many of us are, this is the way to go. It's just one of the things we offer. Again, Richard? Right, here's something else we offer. This is my path, if you will, and that would be right up until Scotland. That would be the path of pretty much all of us, all the males, sorry, Fiona, in this society. This is our path all the way back to Africa. This is Snip Tracker, which is built by a friend of mine, Rob Spencer, here in Connecticut. And it actually, when you go on this, it will give you the path that our R1b DNA has traveled for the last 50,000 years. Note, at one point, we're out in Mongolia, which is quite the question these days. But this is actually how Europe was formed. When we get into the Middle Ages and the Bronze Age, rather, you see us coming into Europe. That's the blue ones. And finally, we come across the channel and into Scotland. I just think that the DNA, when coupled with the history, is absolutely what the future holds. They're calling it genetic genealogy. You will have heard that. We can actually do that. We can put these things together. Richard is our super genealogist. Peter and I bang each other on the head over history. Richard and I do the DNA project with Family Tree DNA. We're the counselors on that. And with it, I think we've got a much more revealing picture of who we are and how we got here. Go again, Richard. This is just the tree that you get when you test with DNA, Family Tree DNA. And as you can see, we're all broken out. You can't really see our names, but you can see our numbers. And it will show you exactly who your closest McGregor relatives who have tested are. You can then get in touch with them. And it goes from there. Okay? Go again, Richard. This is one from 2009, which Malcolm mentioned, a very memorable gathering, the March Up the Mile. This was the front rank of Clan Gregor heading for the mile at that point. Arthur's Craig in the background. This is a great example to kick off what happens when we do games, when we gather, because it was kind of impromptu. People came out of the woodwork, really. And the March Up the Mile was, I think, something none of us will ever forget. So there's the 2009 beginning. Richard, again. And we do tours. Let's come on to the next phase of what we do, which is tours. We've been doing the internationals every 4 years. Every year we go somewhere in our gatherings, but the internationals are something really special. And I know there's many people watching this video who are planning to come on the tours. This is a group, this is Larry McGregor's group that we brought over to Rob Roy's grave. Kind of a wet, murky day, as usual. But this is the sort of thing we offer. And I don't think that too many others can do this. If they do it, I don't think they do it on the scale that we do it. We'll be launching, hopefully, 2 coaches coming up in 2024. We do a lot of the McGregor homelands. We do a lot of the more important sites and some fun sites too. But the fact is that who else is doing this sort of thing in Scotland for their chapters around the world? Richard? Now, if you like getting your hands dirty, if you're a gardener or worse, we also do archaeology. This is our very first year out in the field. You can tell we're ill-dressed and ill-prepared, and our feet are soaking wet. This is Stranmilchan. This is the field where we hoped we would find the outlines of the homes of our early chiefs. We had picked all this up through research, through the Dean of Lismore. It's how we got the Dalmally stones identified. This was looking for their fortified manor house out in the field. And you can see quite a few pictures when you go back to those newsletters. There are quite a few pictures. I just thought you should see the motley crew that went out and broke the first turf. That's Richard on the left, by the way, and Gavin. Right. Richard?
Yeah.
Right. So here's a little compendium of what it looked like. We went from down in the field to up on the hill because there was something described as Time Moor, the big house up on the hill. And here I am with my Indiana Jones hat, not really, and Richard with his. What we found up there has changed a bit of our history. That black smudge you see next to Richard and I is actually a burning event. In fact, it's 2 burning events done by Black Duncan Campbell. If you don't know who he is, you will. In the days of the McGregor conflicts, let's call them, with the Campbells, which actually lasted quite a long time. What we found was the dates. And when you get dates, you find yourself in history. And this date is 1275 or earlier. That means that we, McGregors, this was our land, that is Glen Stray, you're looking down toward the loch, were making weapons, making, well, let's say forging iron is the nice way to put it. But it's very clear that we had a lot more going in Glenorchy, Glen Stray than anybody ever realized. This is before Robert Bruce gave our lands to the Campbells. And frankly, at this point in time, we were not necessarily on that side. So it was much more than just digging up, oh, here's a furnace and here's some rocks and here's some fireplaces. Oh, yes, and here's some slag metal. It really did turn a page in the history books. And of course, all this is on record with the Scottish government. Next. Oh, and then there's these things. These are the Dalmally stones. You may have seen some blurbs coming out lately about this. This past summer, Richard and I made our way to this very churchyard. This is Dalmally. It's the central church, the center of the McGregor homelands. It is the church where our chiefs are buried, which we proved also. And this was a tour, I think 2011, where we were showing people that we had a theory that these certain stones, the ones at their feet, were the ones we were after and had indeed belonged to our chiefs. In fact, there's a fair chance now that we've proven that these were carved by none other than the Knights Templar in the 13 and 1400s. So here's what happens when history meets research. On, please. And as I said, this last summer was quite an epic event. Here we are getting these 7 stones that we were able to identify, working with actually a very professional conservator company, getting these stones lifted. No mean feat. The heaviest one was something like 430 kilos, Richard, or 880 pounds. Mm-hmm. And they are now being cleaned and preserved in Edinburgh for positioning inside the church, very near to the chiefs that they belonged to hundreds of years ago. We thought this was a part of archaeology that maybe a lot of people hadn't thought about, but here it is, and we are working on this project as we speak. Richard? That is indeed the stones, 2 of them, and that is indeed where they're going. And you can see there's other projects going on here as well. Interested a tourist over there. Okay. Well, I couldn't go through this without mentioning, of course, the big man himself. If you don't know what this is, it's Rob Roy's grave. The railing was put up in 1898. And the man standing next to it, looking dapper, is actually John McGregor Blaine, with his hand on the very cairn that he built. He's the one that around 1988, as a builder, as a contractor in the Glen, put up that plaque, which I think is known to most of us, and really kind of elevated the status of the gravesite. It's a great introduction for people because here we have a modern Scot who built part of Rob Roy's grave. Here's Rob Roy's grave with a railing that was built at a different time. And of course, it's one of our primary locations that we go to when we're on tour. Okay. The great man himself. Well, as portrayed by Sir Walter Scott, this is John Clyde from a play that came out of the novel Rob Roy, written in 1817 by Sir Walter. And this exhibit is in Sir Walter Scott's house at Abbotsford, which we visit and will visit again. The play ran for over 120 years between Edinburgh and London. That's how popular it was. I won't sing the songs for you because I can't sing, but this is one of the exhibits. There's actually 5 separate exhibits in Abbotsford dedicated to Rob Roy and the aftermath of Rob Roy. So if you don't think we have a big man, I'll give you a statistic from the Scotsman who run a popularity contest for people to vote on. It's the newspaper in Scotland, one of them. And for the last few years, Rob Roy has displaced not only Robert Bruce, but also Mary Queen of Scots, and is now listed as the second most popular Scot after William Wallace, which is fitting, in the popular imagination of the Scottish people. So there you go. Even an outlaw can be famous. Next. And of course, we have something other clans, not all clans have, I should say. We have our chief and our lady. We have a very good chief and a very good lady. And we really do have the kind of leadership that's necessary when you're global. It's sad to see at some of the games we attend that not everyone has a chief or not everyone has leadership. And there are clans who wish they had a chief. So just a tip of the hat to our royalty here. One more. Oh, this is another view of, I believe it's Glengyle House. So Malcolm had a year, and this is several years previous to that. This is 1886. You can see sort of probably some of the same faces. And look at the ivy covering Glengyle House. That, of course, is all gone today. But yes, we were doing this 100 years ago, and hopefully we'll be doing it in 100 more, right? Now, I'd be remiss if I started with the newsletter if I didn't end at the end of the newsletter. And this is really a very important page. When you're getting in touch with us, wherever you are in the world, these are the people who make it happen. This is council at the top, and of course, all our chapter leaders at the bottom. I apologize for not putting up a whole bunch of pictures about you. We try to do that every year, every issue actually of the newsletter, because we like what you're doing out there. We are functional all around the world. We visit each other, we talk to each other, and it creates quite a camaraderie, quite a kinship. So sorry, folks, I will highlight you going forward, but this is actually the people you need to know are your leaders for us, our representatives out in the world. Very important page, and you can get in touch with them because their emails are listed on the back page. I think that does it for me. Richard, oh, pretty little crest. I couldn't resist putting up one pretty little crest.
Keith, thank you very much indeed. That was a super presentation, it really was. And I just like to echo, and I know the whole council would like to echo what you said about everybody around the world, all these different chapters, all pulling together to really highlight what MacGregors do and to bring people into the clan and into the society. You're doing an amazing job right around the world. So thank you so very much. So we are 200 years old. And of course, when you've got a big birthday like that, you get lots of birthday cards and congratulations and greetings, don't you? So here is a message from the Canada branch. So here's Wayne.
Greeting from beautiful Loch Livingston in the wilds of Ontario, Canada. I am Wayne MacGregor Parker, and I have the good fortune of being the chairman of the Canadian chapter of the Clan Gregor Society. All around me, you'll see the beautiful Algonquin Highlands, so named by our ancestors. In fact, they were reminded of Scotland so much that they felt they were in Scotland, and for good reasons. Billions of years ago, the tectonic plates shifted, and a big chunk of the North American plate called the Canadian Shield traveled east and became Scotland. So Scotland and Canada have a lot in common. But today we have much more in common than just rocks. Canada claims to have more people of Scottish descent than any other nation of the world outside of Scotland itself. Our country grew up knowing what it was like to be in the shadow of a superpower, much the same as Scotland. Today, Canada draws its governmental forms from the traditions of England and France and America, the traditions of a constitutional monarchy, of a democratic parliament, and from a congressional representation. All of these help to form the country of Canada and our form of governance. Today, we have Scottish people widely represented Thousands and thousands and thousands of immigrants, wave after wave, post-Culloden and well into the clearances, came to Canada, a land that they understood all too well because it reminded them so much of home. And they worked hard to form the nation that we have today. And today we have members in the Clan Gregor Society Canada chapter from all over Canada. Our country is enjoying a real revival today in Scottish history and Scottish studies, with degree courses and multiple colleges teaching Gaelic and piping and other Highland arts. The Clan Gregor Society itself, Canada chapter, was formed in 2009 after a short conversation with Sir Malcolm McGregor and Chairman Richard and Keith McGregor about how many Canadians there were that were McGregors, but only 15 were members. And so we formed the chapter in 2012. Today we have over 120 members from all over our country, and we're growing, enjoying the revival and the interest of Scottish studies in our country. We work hard to keep in touch with our members through regular communications, attendance in games, participation in Highland arts, and sponsoring of dancers and pipers and drummers and Scottish events. We also issue the Maple Leaf McGregor, which comes out regularly to keep our members connected. We welcome all those who seek their Scottish heritage and history and help them to understand what it is to be a McGregor. Thank you for joining us here in Canada.
Wayne, thank you so much. That was just great. And what a beautiful backdrop you have there. We must come to Canada one of these days. We'll have an international gathering, McGregor gathering in Canada. Right, next we have Frank McGregor, Australia and New Zealand representative on council on behalf of members in the Southern Hemisphere. Good morning to you, Frank, or is good morning very early?
Greetings all from down under, Australia. My name is Frank McGregor. I am the Australasian representative for the Society. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to say hello on behalf of all our members in Australia and New Zealand, because it's been a very lean 3 years for us to catch up at Highland gatherings and elsewhere. Most of this was caused by COVID, but surprisingly lately in Australia it's also been caused by floods. Because we haven't been able to attend gatherings, I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about a famous McGregor's gathering that was penned by Sir Walter Scott in the 18th century, I believe. Many of us have heard of it, but in case you haven't, I encourage you to go and have a look at it after this Zoom meeting. I'm not going to recite the whole poem, but here is a taste so you understand what I'm about to do, as I've penned a revised version of McGregor's gathering, a 2020s version. And the first verse goes like this. The moon's on the lake and the mists on the brae. The clan has a name that is nameless by day. And gather, 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 Gregorlack. Gather, gather, gather. And now for the world premiere of McGregor's Gathering 2020s version. The moon's on the lake, but a virus could be nearby. And the virus has a name, so we stay home all day. Then gather, 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 Gregorlack, all the toilet roll you can. Gather, 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 before the Campbells can. Our signal for fight, while stuck at home, could become true. May be heard by our neighbours in our vengeful halloo. Then hello, 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 Gregorlack. Hello, hello, hello. Our beautiful homes, with our gardens of flowers, the banks have foreclosed, they are no longer ours. We are landless, 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 Gregorlack. Landless, landless, landless. Doomed by this new virus and isolation laws, McGregor's now Skype, but no more than 4. And courage, 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 Gregorlack. Courage, courage, courage. If they rob us of our toilet roll and take away our pasta, then we'll shut a coal. Us McGregors will muster. And vengeance, 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 Gregorlack. Vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. Oh, there's loaves on our table and foam in our beer. McGregor, despite them, shall flourish forever. Come then, Gregorlack, come then, come then, come then. Through the depths of despair for this horrible year, we may lose some kinfolk that we hold so dear. But wherever you are, dig deep and have courage to sustain When this virus is over, we will hear your call and gather again. Then hello, 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 Gregor. Hello from Australia. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Great to catch up with you kinfolk.
Ah, Frank, that was just wonderful. That is so you, and brilliant poem. Absolutely love it. Right, now we have also greetings from our German branch, which is headed by Hendrik Kappler and Angelika Winter.
Dear Gregor, I'm Hendrik, Chairman, and Angelika, Secretary of the German chapter. Today we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Clan Gregor Society. We send greetings from the German chapter to Chief and Lady, President and Council, and all the members around the world. Slantje.
Slantje. How wonderful is that? And Hendrik and Angelika are such big supporters of the society. They're there every year, usually come over in their camper van over here to Scotland, and they are so helpful. They are really amazing. So thank you, guys. Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, out of the Clan Gregor Society came the American Clan Gregor Society. That was formed in 1909. And today we're very lucky because we have its chieftain, Scott McGregor, with us. Scott, we are delighted to have you here today. We really are, and other members of your society, I believe. And would you like to say a few words, please?
Good morning, Nancy. From all our members in the society, and yes, there's a few of us on here. We wish you all good greetings, and you've done wonderful and everything for being 200 years going here strong. And I think we are all very proud and everything to be a part of this. And we wish you many more years going forwards and everything. Looking forward to seeing this society in 400 years. Thank you.
Scott, thank you very much. And here's to working together more closely, the two groups in the future. So there we are, McGregor's worldwide, and it's really good to see everybody here today. Now, the tunes that we heard at the beginning were played by Richard in Australia, and you can listen again when the edited version of today's meeting, I think we're going to edit it so we take out the little glitches, is uploaded to YouTube. But now let's hear it once more and get a few memories of our clan gatherings. I'm watching that and thinking happy days, and we all look so young, didn't we? I have to say, though, sadly, there are some of the members featured there who are no longer with us. To their family and friends, can we say it was wonderful to know them, and thank you. Now, the Clan Gregor Society's original purpose was education. Today, it uses its funds for various projects. We've been hearing about some of them already. So here is our Treasurer and Society President, Alpin McGregor, to tell us a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the Society. Alpin.
Thank you very much, Fiona. And hello to everyone who's watching. My name's Alpin McGregor, and I'm the President of the Clan Gregor Society. I'm also the Chief's second cousin. As the Chief has explained, the Society was founded with charitable intentions. And in 1983, those intentions were given formal recognition when the Society became a registered charity in Scotland. I want to spend just a few minutes explaining the consequences of the Society having charitable status. There are some financial advantages, some things that we must do, and some things that we cannot do. The main thing that we cannot do is undertake any significant commercial activity for profit. Also, the members of council may not be paid apart from the reimbursement of expenses. We have the financial advantage of exemption from taxes on income and on investment gains. And also, UK taxpayers can obtain a tax deduction for their donations. On the other hand, we have to justify our charitable status by providing a suitable level of public benefit. Public benefit means, in simple terms, that the charity must make a positive difference to the public and not just to its members. We satisfy that condition by the nature of many of our projects. And our chairman, Richard, will be describing several of them. Examples are our archaeological digs, our DNA project, grants to university students, and the very significant Dalmally Stones project. The benefit of each of these things extends well beyond our own membership. Now, of course, all those things cost money. It is therefore very important that we get new members to add to our subscription income. And we also make very good use of the very generous donations that we receive from our existing members. Thank you, and back to Fiona.
Alpin, thank you very much indeed. And there we have Alpin and Maria's beautiful estate there up in the Highlands, absolutely gorgeous and very informative as well. Alpin, thank you. And yes, new members always welcome. So if you know of McGregor, join them up. Now, as I said earlier, our chairman is in his 28th year of running the society. I was going to say poor man, but I think he rather thrives on it, which is good for us. And in that time, there's been a lot of water under the bridge. There's been a lot of digging, both into the past and into the ground. Richard, could you please tell us what the society does in genealogy and archaeology?
Thank you, Fiona. Well, the thing is, we start from what we know. And the history is what we have, at least our heritage and our history is the thing that we hold on to. And that starts very early, really, as you can see from the slide, and goes forward into the three Glens that we know so well. One, it should say three Glens, not Glenorchy twice. But the point is that these are parts of where we go when we look to the past. And we have 850 years that we know about those first settlements established in Glenorchy, you should have said, as it does here. And we are fortunate in many ways, not fortunate because we have no castles, but fortunate that we have such a vast tradition, which includes poetry, talking from many sources, but particularly from the book of the Dean of Lismore. And it's the book of the Dean of Lismore which gives us the obituaries of the earliest clan chiefs, and the yellow or orange arrow is pointing towards the very first one, Johannes Gregor MacGregor, and this is the 1390 record of his burial. And we'll come back to that shortly when we talk about Dalmally. But then for MacGregor's, it was Glenfruin, and everything changed. It looks perfectly flat and normal now, but on that field, our history was changed altogether. So we come to one of our main focuses, which is to say, who are we? Where do we come from? And most of us have some idea. Here's somebody's tree, which has lots of little ideas about origins, about the original person and where they came from. You see at the top, this is a Canadian, Cape Breton. But often we lack the kind of detail that the society has access to, which is what makes our genealogy resources so important. We use all sorts of things. Here's an interesting map that shows the division between Macaras, son of the king, and Macarees. I understand that that's the difference between Protestant and Catholic, but the maps can tell us so much about where to look for the origins. If you look down to Balquhidder, you'll see that the 14 families were up there, whereas Fowlis Wester has the other family. And we don't just use that. We have other things, like this is the Reverend Joseph Robertson MacGregor, who was a minister in the Gaelic Church in Edinburgh and left tokens and a tombstone. Not everybody left tombstones, unfortunately, because his contains some information, except some detail about who his parents were, which is a bit unfortunate. But here's another of the photographs when the society really started to get going. This is in front of Glengyle House. I've no idea why people are stuck in the window, but they are. But this was a photograph which was taken to mark that occasion. So if we go from genealogy, when we go further back, we just don't have the records. They don't exist. Apart from the Book of the Dean of Lismore, which gives us those obituaries. So we're forced to other sources, and the DNA project has been one of the most fruitful. Within that, you get loads of numbers, and people glaze at the numbers. They go, oh, I can't cope with all these numbers. And these tell us about family groupings. Most particularly when we get to the MacGregors, they begin to show how closely related the Argyll's people are. You can see also in the middle that there's a little group there with 16 marked in blue. That indicates that they are particularly one family. We can tell quite a lot from this. And as Keith has said, and this is another version of the tree that he showed, individuals can actually find out who they're more directly related to. And that is really important because subsequently it shows us when you split off. And this one's really interesting because this one is well known, Larry actually, but I'm sure he won't mind, showing that his split was 1800, and he and Robert actually share a common ancestor, which gave him his genealogy back, and the both of them then worked it out from the parish registers. Some is not quite, and that was done in a scientific way by showing what the mean average was, which turned out to be 1802. This one is not quite so recent. This is another one, the Roro families, which clearly split as early as about 1450 or thereabouts. So we've got all this, but we also have objects which we've collected together in Castle Mingus, who've been very good in providing us with the space to do that. And so we've got display cabinets, display boards, lots of them, like these, the armaments which we have acquired over the years. Some of them have, I won't go into it now, but some of them have a known history, some of them don't. But we've collected them all together, and memorabilia from places like Glengyle House are all collected together here. The picture of Rob Roy you can see on the second shelf there is possibly not original, but it's one that's quite common on the internet. Going back further, we can actually start to dig out where we have been. And this is where our archaeology project has been incredibly important. It's not just important for the client, it's been important nationally, as Keith was trying to say earlier. It has produced things like, simple things like carbon dating, which gives us a date right back and finds, what is this? Is this a horse or is it just a nail? Well, we need an X-ray to find out. Pottery, redware pottery, very rare in collections. We have a collection which actually might be soon cited in a museum, because there are only two other collections known like this. Other objects, so we've got the pottery on the left, but iron objects on the right could be this looks like it could be a horseshoe. And one's like, if we go to the right one, first of all, which looks like it is a dagger scabbard. Who knows? We can't actually work out this one at all. Again, an X-ray will help us. The left is the bullet that Keith nearly stood on, that was still live when he was digging in the trench. The first trench is what we dig. But he's still with us, so he didn't stand on it. And of course, there's Rob Roy. Rob Roy has been the source, as Keith said, of so many of our history and the things that we hold dear. And these are some of the facts about him, despite the fact that 75 people on Ancestry believe he was born in Glasgow. That was a Mormon transcription error. That was his completely different name. He was born in very near to Loch Lomond in Buchanan Parish and baptised there. But one of our projects for the future is to dig out where he was. And we started that some years ago with a survey, as you have to do. And that is something which we'll keep on our minds. Once we've got rid of the Dalmally Stone project, this is our next project. The Dalmally Stones, well, there are 7 of them, these marked here in the original locations. One dry summer in Scotland, one of the few dry summers in Scotland. This is what they looked like. This one on the right was cleaned up, but still not cleaned up to the point where it's actually been preserved. And you can see that it was a very complex operation. Took 7 days to get them out the ground because they're really heavy, and we had to have all sorts of lifting equipment. But importantly, we found things like they're only inscribed on the top. There's nothing underneath them. And they're quite rough cast in some respects. They were on top of the gravestone, the graves of the chiefs. And you can see from here, unfortunately, one of the most interesting ones, which is the side panel of a raised coffin, was actually cracked, we think probably when it was put in the ground. And it's quite badly cracked. It'd be interesting to see the conservation on that one, which is going to be the most difficult one. The one on the right has already been cleaned up a little in situ. Then you begin to see some of the detail coming out of it. There will be more to see once they're all cleaned up. The Malaican, which you can see the white, will go. But it was fun for everybody. You can see the one on the left, which was perhaps the most interesting one. It is also the heaviest and the longest. So we speculate that that was either the 1391 or 1519. One of the two is more than likely to be one of the really well-respected chiefs. I would go for 1519, but I think others would like to go for 1390. And of course, we've been talking about 2022 with the pictures of St. Evan and so on. But what Malcolm didn't say was that they still have the jacket that he wore. This was a presentation that they did in Scotland for my wife Philippa. This is if you look carefully, you can see them all marching up the aisle as painted at the time. And here we all are in our different gatherings in 2003, 2018, 2009, and the really interesting one where we were actually piped into as one of the clans at the tattoo in 2017. And this is from the same year, a picture of us all gathered together there. one of Malcolm's favorite, I think one of our favorite shots of Malcolm by his fireside. And Malcolm and Fiona do, as was indicated by Keith, do a lot of visiting and go to lots of places. And here's just a few of the various places that they've been. And here they are with Rory's family when Rory celebrated Stephanie, who died before completing her degree in 1939 and was given what they call an agritat degree very recently. I can't remember the exact year that it was, but very recently. And so this was a celebration of the family. And of course, in America. And of course, in South Africa. And here are your council members. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing, isn't it? And Ishbel, you know, has been doing this for so long as secretary, and now Ross is doing it as secretary. Guy McGregor, Guy does our finances for us, has been doing them now. Of course, treasurer is Rory McGregor, and Rory's also masterminding the technicalities of today's meeting. So thank you for that, Rory. You're looking very smart in your bow tie. Steve White there, Stephen White, membership secretary. Frank there from Australia. Keith from America. Richard is our web design guy. He's done a fantastic job on that website. Alpin, our president. There's somebody in the middle, don't know who she is. Peter Laurie, our vice chairman. Peter gave us the great talk on tartan. And of course, our beloved chairman, Richard, who's done 28 years into his 28th year. Right, okay. Thank you so much. Here we are, 200 years on. We can't gather this year to mark that anniversary, but we will be getting together in 2024 when we're planning our international gathering, and we really hope to see you there. So that's 2024, we are having an international gathering. So now we are going to go over to our chief again, who has a story about a cocktail. Now, my husband is a dab hand at making cocktails, and he loves cocktails made with whiskey, of course. And it is not, it's not malt whiskey. It's not malt. It is actual whiskey, a blend that it's made with. So what have you got for us this time? Here is Sir Malcolm McGregor of McGregor.
Welcome to the Chief's Drinks Room, where I'm going to show you how to make a cocktail called a Dirty McGregor. Now, the Dirty McGregor is named after a big storm that used to rage around the Western Isles, particularly around Loch Linnhe and the island of Mull. And when the MacLeans were in conflict with the McGregors, they called a storm the Dirty McGregor. A Dirty McGregor is coming down Loch Linnhe, and it was used as a sort of disparaging name, I suppose. Anyway, I have used this name, the Dirty McGregor, as the name of this cocktail to take us back to those days in the 1600s when Dirty McGregors used to rage around the west coast of the Highlands. But before we actually get into how to make the cocktail, I'm just going to say a few things about cocktail making generally. And the first thing is that a cocktail needs to be ice cold, and so the cocktail shaker I have filled with ice and to make the shaker cold, which will leave a residual water at the bottom. So the first thing one does is pour the residual water out into a glass, not much there, and my cocktail shaker is ice cold. Okay, the next thing we have is a measuring gill, and this is a traditional one. Basically, one can work it that the smaller one is 1 unit and the bigger one is 2 units. You need a stirrer and a knife if you're cutting any fruit. There is no fruit involved in the Dirty McGregor, and I might just say that the simpler the cocktail, the better, generally speaking. So the ingredients of a Dirty McGregor is good whiskey, and never use low quality drink for cocktails. Good whiskey, key ingredient, King's ginger, and orange bitters, not Angostura, not bitters. They're orange bitters. What I'm going to do now is actually measure out the ingredients for the Dirty McGregor. So first off, Isle of Skye 8-year-old, very nice whiskey, blended. Don't use malt for this cocktail. And we are going to put 2.5 gills into the cocktail shaker. So that's 2. Two and a half. Now the next thing we're going to put in is the King's Ginger, which is quite an old liqueur made by Berry Brothers and Rudd in London, with the picture of Edward VII on the front, and he liked his King's Ginger, particularly when out shooting. Now King's Ginger is quite a strong liqueur, so I only put in half a gill. Okay, and the final thing are the orange bitters. And this is just 2 or 3 dashes into the cocktail. So there we have the simplicity of it: whiskey, King's Ginger, orange bitters. The next thing is to really stir it up, to get the ice, to get the cocktail, really cold. And I always do it using this method rather than the James Bond method, shaken not stirred. So that's the cocktail stirred not shaken, and the reason we stir it is because we're trying to prevent shards of ice getting into the drink and therefore watering it down, because it'll melt quite quickly, the shards of ice, that is. So we're now ready to pour, and in we go. Nice cocktail glass.
You're reading that.
And I don't add any cherries or anything like that. It's just straight up. Wonderful sensation. The Dirty McGregor.
That certainly is, isn't it? Isn't that wonderful? You're good with your cocktails, aren't you?
Yes, there are plenty more to come.
Plenty more to come. I think that's a threat. Right, that 200 years, this is such a milestone. In fact, it is so good that we really ought to finish with a toast. Would you like to do the toast to the
Yes,
Gregor Society?
I'd like to toast the Gregor Society 2022, 200 years, and to the future.
To the future,
To
and
the future.
Gregor Society.
And the health of the society.
Thank you, Chief. That was absolutely great. And thanks to everybody who's been on this Zoom today. And to those who couldn't be here, but have supported us throughout the years. We really appreciate everything you've done for us. So members of Clan Gregor, we wish you good luck and goodwill until we meet again.